Sally is the Downstate Advocacy Director for the Illinois chapter, and with her is Christine Fabula. She's the River City Project Coordinator. And please go see them tonight. They got a lot of great materials. If you want to keep this going afterwards, if you want to understand how to make sure that your community is protected, please go talk to them. They have some great information to hand out to you. All right, so Residents for Responsible Growth. Who on earth are we? We're just a group of folks that got together, came together when we started hearing about a large-scale data center coming to our town in Troy. And when those conversations started, at first it was just an article in the newspaper. And I don't think we thought much of it, to be honest with you. It was about ordinances being passed. Most of us didn't know or probably even care what a data center was. But within a short time, within about a month's time, things started moving very quickly. It went from an article in the newspaper to about a month later, Cloverleaf, who is the company that's currently interested in trying to bring data centers to Madison County, Cloverleaf coming to City Council and talking to us about a 300-acre data campus that they wanted to bring to town. 300 acres, that's about 8% of our town. So a data center campus they wanted to bring to town. It would surround a church, schools, neighborhood. And we didn't know what to do. We felt helpless. And this was a large company. Their message was very polished. And we felt helpless, but we also didn't feel like this was a fit. We were wondering what was going to do to the fabric of our town, and it just didn't feel like a fit for our town. And I will say this, the coolest thing happened afterwards is to see our town come together and stand up together, show up to City Council, reach out to their aldermen, and have that united voice to make sure our voices were heard. It was great to see them come together, and as of next week, Troy's expected to pass a moratorium that at least pause data center proposals from coming to our town. And it gives Troy a chance to make sure those ordinances are written the right way, to make sure we're protected, but also, most importantly, to make sure we understand the impacts of a data center coming to town. We already know about the revenue when they come in and they pitch that, but what are the impacts? What can it do to a town? And so that pauses Troy. But we know Madison County is still very interested in bringing data centers to town. Cloverleaf that I mentioned, they want to bring 3 data center campuses into the county. So 300 acres or more. It would be in 3 different cities. Troy's off the table, they have to find a new one. But they're looking at Granite City. They have interest in Edwardsville. But with Troy being off the table, it does disrupt them a little bit, and it puts us in a unique advantage. The unique advantage is there's no formal proposal yet. And that's not something that every community gets. We've seen communities across the region that they're finding out about these projects when the proposals are happening, once those timelines are set, and they're trying to basically stand in front of a freight train and stop it. So that's what tonight's about. Tonight's about before the proposal. So a chance to level the playing field. You've heard from data centers coming in. You understand their messaging of the revenue that it'll bring in. It's basically the golden egg, and if you don't take it, you're a fool. But what about the other side of it? What about understanding those impacts? And so tonight we have our featured speakers. We have Prescott Welch. He's a retired tech executive. He spent his lifetime in the tech field, and he was building software that ran large-scale data centers. He's got a unique twist too. He also fought off a large-scale data center coming to his town in Caledonia, Wisconsin. We also have Mr. Scott Allen. He's an energy policy specialist with the Citizens Utility Board, and he'll help you understand what happens to the infrastructure, what happens to your rates. So this is a chance to hear from people who understand how these projects work, and most importantly, they understand the impact. So they'll each walk you through a presentation, not a long presentation, I promise. They'll each walk you through a presentation, but then afterwards, it's your chance to come up for a Q&A. So come up to the podium and feel free to ask questions. If there's a long line behind you, just be cognizant of the people behind you so everybody can ask their question. We have people in the back of the room that'll have index cards if you're shy. So go visit one of them, fill out the card. If you're super shy and you're trying to get over it, we'll put you as the opening act on Charlie's tour. Can we do that?
Sure.
Sure, he said yes. All right, and so tonight, we do want this to be a conversation. We've got a fireside chat here. We do want this to be a conversation. We want it to be a Midwest conversation, because that's who we are. And so who better to capture the spirit of that, the spirit of the Midwest, the spirit of what we are, the heartland here, than our special guest speaker. He's a comedian, he's a storyteller, he's a commentator, he's amassed a huge following. He talks about life in small towns just like ours. And he's also seen what happens when these projects come into communities in his home state, Wisconsin. So if everybody give a warm welcome to our special guest speaker, Mr. Charlie Berens.
All right. Hey, give yourselves a big round of applause for coming out tonight, guys. It's pretty cool. On what, Monday night? Is it Monday night? Good. Okay. Good on the road. A little bit. Nice to see you guys. Can I just give a shout out to the Moose Lodge for having us here tonight. Thanks to them. Don't forget to tip your bartenders, guys. It is Lent, okay? Where are my Catholics at? We got any Catholics here? Yep. They're all drinking. You can find them very easily. So, all right. Remember, it's Lent. We tip our bartenders. That's good. Any Packers fans in this audience? Let's see that. There you go. I know. I'm getting to the Bears fans. Where are my Bears fans at? Okay. Are you guys going to move to Indiana or no? What do we think? No. Good. Because if it happens, I got
Town hall next week.
town hall next week. I'm out. Okay. As a Packers fan, I kind of hope you do, because I've got a great T-shirt. It's Indiana Bears Suck, and the IBS line is just going to really crush. So I'm hopeful for that. All right. But anyways, I got some notes here so I don't go off script, which I already have. But anyways, if there are any local officials here, just want to give those guys a big round of applause, guys and gals, for showing up here. And I think the important thing to remember with all this is that, everyone's on the same team. This is a very complicated technology. It's a complicated deal, and it's hard to understand everything. So that's why, it's just bringing more information together and just treating it like that. I'm from Wisconsin. We had a lot of these data centers pushed through. In some cases, there were NDAs, and they were already starting construction before people knew what was going on. So the point, and that's kind of a devastating thing, especially if you live right next to that data center to have your whole life turned upside down and not even know it was happening. Not a lot of people go to common council meetings or village board meetings, and there's not a ton of great local press anymore. And so it's easy for these things to slip through the cracks, and before you know it, you got a lot of problems on your hands. So anyways, but at the core of it, I'm just here because I want the Midwest to decide for the Midwest. That's it. I don't want a big tech company to decide for the Midwest. And part of making a decision is it's having information. And a lot of the information, as we already said, on these AI data centers, they come from the companies that are pushing the AI data centers. And you don't want to just go off that information. Like a few years ago, I bought this book for my Uncle Jack, okay? Now, my Uncle Jack, he's one of them guys who talks like this. He talks like, hey there, guy, how you doing there, guy? He talks like a didgeridoo, And he always wears the same thing, pair of jeans, t-shirt tucked into the jeans, and it's a V-neck t-shirt, except he didn't purchase it as a V-neck t-shirt, Just been tucking it down there. But anyways, he sold me this boat, okay? And I said, Jack, is is the boat in good shape? He goes, oh yeah, that boat will float. That boat will float. And I bought that boat and I put it in the water. And well, it 3 leaks in that boat. Nice rivet job, Jack. So I called him up. I says, Jack, the boat's got leaks. He said, I didn't tell you how long it would float for. So that's what we're kind of going for tonight. Just have as much information as possible. And I also want to kind of just throw this out there. I'm not getting paid. I've never gotten paid for this. Some people have said that since I made a couple videos on this. Because if I was going to get paid for talking about an issue, I would definitely want to be on the side of the issue with the money, So I'm not dumb, But yeah, I've never been paid. I just really do, especially after seeing what's happened in Wisconsin. I got a passion for making sure the community has control over their own community. Reason I got into it is I had people send me messages about a data center in Port Washington, where I'm from. And then I watched a common council meeting and I saw like dozens of people stand up and say they didn't want this thing, and the common council voted unanimously. And to kind of see that imbalance of democracy, it didn't really feel right. So I made a video, not thinking it would do anything. The video just took off. And what you saw there was you saw so many people having positive comments. So I wanted to keep speaking out for these people who I felt like didn't have a voice. And I also want to start off by saying there's a big misconception about AI data centers, that it's just a normal data center. And if you're against an AI data center, then you're against emails and social media and text messages and pictures. There's a very big difference between a traditional data center and an AI data center. An AI data center uses different hardware, GPUs, it uses way more energy or more water and so kind of comparing an AI data center to a traditional data center, it's kind of like comparing a dog to a wolf, Like they both kind of look like dogs, but I'd only let one lick my face. Let's just say that. So that's an important distinction to get out of the way here first. Now, a big issue that I personally have with AI data centers is regulation. There's not a lot of regulation on the federal or state levels protecting us. There's more regulation on a bratwurst than the entire artificial intelligence industry. A bratwurst, okay, wrong audience for that one. There's more regulation on a hot dog than the entire. I get really upset about this because I'm trying to sell brats out of my minivan and people got health code issues with that. Meanwhile, we're putting up these data centers, something's not adding up to me. If you guys want a brat, I'll be out by my minivan afterwards. Now I know that there are some bills pending in your state legislature, at least in Illinois, but you really want to ask, are your power bills protected? Okay, there's a lot of ways for the utilities to hide the cost of these data centers and then pass those costs along to you guys. I'm not sure of your specifics, but something you want to look into. Is your water protected? Not just the amount of water that's being used, but what on these closed loop systems that they say use less water, there are chemicals that they put in that water, biocides and glycol, which some of these are standard chemicals, but the EPA just fast-tracked new chemicals that they can use to cool these data centers. And, I do have concerns about that because in Wisconsin, we got a huge PFAS problem. And those were chemicals that got approved and people didn't know what happened. And now we have PFAS, these forever chemicals. They're in the fish. And as a fisher and a hunter, they're in the ducks. So they say you can't eat the fish in certain lakes. And so it's just making sure that whatever chemicals these companies are using, that they disclose it, you know about it, and more importantly, you know how they'll treat it. A lot of water plants can't take out these chemicals. So those are just things to consider. And personally, I think we're getting asked with these data centers to pay a lot, but I feel like we've already paid too much. When it comes to big tech, we really have paid a lot. We are the product for big tech. We are. We've already paid with our data. We've paid with our privacy. We've paid with the mental health of our children. You look at the studies around that. We've paid with the education of our children. largely due to technology. Gen Z is the first generation that's officially dumber than the previous generation, which honestly, that part I'm okay with, because I knew that all along. But now they want us to give up our land, they want us to trust them with our water, and they want to change the soul of our communities. That's a lot of payment to ask. That's like asking the lobster in the tank at Red Lobster to start paying rent. You know, it's like, just give us a biscuit. The biscuits are great. Okay, you guys don't like Red Lobster. I don't care. That's fine. But big tech, they're spending a lot of money, but that money is going into lobbying. And if you look at the lobbying dollars flowing through the state and federal lobbying agencies, it's a lot, you know? But I'll say this, you can't buy what's happening in this room here. You got Democrats, you got Republicans, you got farmers, you got bird watchers, you know, you got so many people coming together, and this is the most bipartisan issue since beer. And I think that says something. So I think we want to just take a step back and look at the bigger picture. And I think the bigger picture is trust. If a company is going to come in and ask so much of a small community to sacrifice, you got to be able to trust that company. But most big tech companies, I don't know if they're giving us a whole lot to trust. I know this technology can do great things, and I think it's important to acknowledge that. But we also have to acknowledge it's a double-edged sword. Like most tech companies, they're already treating these machines better than they're treating people. Just look at the lobbying that's gone on against the protection of kids on social media. We also have to be able to trust the technology itself. And these are just a few headlines I pulled. AI chatbots shows nuclear escalation in 95% of simulated war games. That's according to the King's College of London. Leading AI models show up to 96% blackmail rate when their goals of existence are threatened. That's from Anthropic. It's from the BBC. Mothers say chatbots encourage their sons to kill themselves. AI mass surveillance problem getting worse. So I think it's a very narrow road to developing a more intelligent technology than humans. And it's a very narrow road to make that safe. The AI companies, they need these data centers. But maybe before we decide to give up our communities and change our communities, these tech companies need to show us why we can trust them. So that's it. Thank you guys so much. Appreciate it. And ladies and gentlemen, I don't know anything except jokes, but this man, Prescott Balch, ladies and gentlemen, he is a retired tech executive. I don't even know if I'm doing your intro, but I'm going to do it right now. He's a very smart man. He helped out a lot of communities. Give him a big round of applause. Prescott Balch. Balch, it rhymes with mulch.
Who am I? Why should you listen to me? I do have to correct one thing. I wrote software and managed software that ran in data centers, not ran data centers. Just a clarification. I gotta be precise. You'll learn that about me as I go through this presentation. So, being in the technology business, I firmly believe we need data centers. We need them somewhere. I'm all about trying to find where the right place is. And sorry, what? Oh.
No. When you say where to put them, Elon Musk.
Okay. Oh, okay. Sorry. I get it now.
Sorry.
I'm not convinced on the space thing, but we can talk about that later. I had one of these show up in my backyard, and I thought it was a terrible idea. I found myself doing all the research and all of the due diligence that I thought my own village should have been doing. I found out the hard way that they didn't do any due diligence, and that where they were trying to put it was a really horrible place and would
blow up eventually for the village. The only thing that I didn't know was when. Was it going to be 10 years, 15, 20 years, whatever? I'm also a spoiler of rescued animals, and the horse picture always helps, makes me feel like a real human. But let's get into the details here. So don't trust anybody that will tell you it's all risk or it's all reward. There's almost nothing that happens these days that's one or the other of those. I'm completely fair about and open about what the benefits are. There is an eye-watering amount of revenue associated with these projects. If you've never seen one of these hyperscale data centers, they're absolutely massive. I have one down the highway from me on Pleasant, and driving around the 1 mile radius parcel is an exercise that you will never forget. You drive by at 45 miles an hour and the thing just keeps going and going and going and going. And then you turn the corner and it's going and going and going. These are absolutely massive complexes. And as a result of the size of the buildings, they produce a lot of valuation that is then taxed. And that turns into a lot of tax revenue. The smaller your community, the more eye-watering it's going to be. But like everything, if a Nigerian prince calls you and tells you he's got a lot of money for you and just wants your bank account number, you're naturally going to be skeptical. What I found with my village was they're not skeptical. They see the dollar amount and they just want to go, go, go. You will also absolutely get an abundant amount of construction jobs. Much of that will be itinerant labor because you're a small village and you don't have that many people, so they have to bring them in. But you will have a lot of construction activity, a lot of construction jobs, and that work for years and years will generate some associated economic impact. They will have to shop here, they will have to eat here, and it will definitely produce some indirect economic benefit. But that tax revenue benefit comes with a dark side or another edge of the sword. The other edge of that sword is a financial concentration risk. We all learned when we were kids, don't put all your eggs in one basket. Those little soundbites exist for a reason because they're really simple messages. These two graphs, these two circles are Port Washington and Beaver Dam that have active projects, and they are currently driving towards that distribution of tax revenue, with the red being everything else and the blue being the tax revenue from one taxpayer in one industry. That is putting most of your eggs in one basket. I've seen communities that are so small, in fact, we were at one yesterday, that if they build one there, it will be more like 90% of the revenue. It is a really dangerous place to be. And this morning, because I'm somewhat deranged, I woke up and said, I really need to know how Illinois law dictates how conservative communities have to be about investing spare cash. If you have spare cash and you don't need to spend it now, you want to invest it and make some money on it, the state law forces you to be extremely conservative about that. I don't need to tell you all that Illinois does not exactly have a reputation for being fiscally prudent, but they have a state law that says local governments have to invest their money in AAA rated bonds. They don't want you to bet the farm on one investment. So use that as a backdrop in your head for everything I'm about to say for the rest of this discussion, because I'm going to lay out all the risks that come with the rewards that look like big dollar amounts. First risk here is financial concentration. All your eggs in one basket. If this were a high-risk investment in your investment portfolio of your village's spare cash, the state would tell you you're breaking the law. Next, there's one thing in technology that everyone agrees on, and that is when a new thing comes along, we get really exuberant about it, and we race up this path to the inflated expectations, and then just like the dot-com bubble burst, we realize, gee, we got a little over our skis on that, and we come crashing back down, pulls a lot of money out of the market, and we reassess, and we figure out what the steady state is. We will figure out that same steady state of investment and cost with artificial intelligence, I have no doubt. But we're on the way up that graph question for your community leaders is, do we want to ride that with them? Would we rather wait it out and see where this thing is going and make sure that we're not one of the problem children that's half built when the bubble bursts? And another graph here on bubbles, those circles are to scale. The small circle is the current size of the data center industry today, and the larger circle is the aggregate of all the proposed data centers in the country. There is no industry that grows that fast without making a huge mess. None, ever. Doesn't happen. There's also an obsolescence risk. I'm sure all of you know from the technology in your homes and your pockets that technology changes really rapidly. It is also true of data center technology. You've all probably heard the term closed loop water system that the data center industry is bragging about, and they like to puff up their chests and say, see, we solved the problem, aren't we great? I like to flip that argument around with them and say, yes, and 3 years ago that didn't exist. And now there's pressure on all of those data centers that have already happen time after time after time because technology improves all the time, and technology industry throws away its old technology like used tissues. And they will throw away anything when the math says to move on, and the new technology comes along and it's bigger, better, faster, cheaper. And you don't want to be left holding the bag with a data center campus that's half built or partially built buildings, and or companies that have gone bankrupt. And especially if you're a really small community, it's a dangerous place to be. One very unique protection that a community put in place was to force the developer to buy a $10 million destruction bond. So if the buildings that they were building ever stayed vacant for 5 consecutive years, they could use the bond to destroy them. That's probably the most unique protection I've seen in all of my travels around the upper Midwest. There's another huge risk here, and that is the David versus Goliath. David does beat Goliath in certain books, one of which was a very popular book called the Bible. But when it's small community versus Fortune 50 company, I'm afraid the odds aren't very good. A small company or small community does not have the wherewithal to negotiate before, during, or after the deal with a large company. I will use probably the single most helpful instance of that was Port Washington. In Port Washington, immediately after the deal was announced or signed by the village, the developer showed up and said, thank you very much, we would now like you to approve a 24/7 construction schedule. And they said, fine, just turn the lights off that you're not using when you're working in that. I swear to God, they said that. And they approved it because they have no choice. They got hooked on a deal, and now they're dependent on it as a village or city to deliver the revenue on a certain schedule, and they have no choice but to say yes to everything. At that concentration risk that I had a few slides ago, they own you. The developer owns you. They are the lion's share of your revenue, and if that revenue dries up, it's everybody in this room that gets to pay the bill. So the village has no choice but to say yes to absolutely everything. There are also some benefit myths. Some people call these lies. I won't go that far because I don't want any of them coming after me. But the first one is jobs. I don't care what they say, go to the actual data. I got the actual data from Northern Virginia. There are 549 data centers in Northern Virginia and 10,000 and change jobs directly resulting from the data center industry. That is an average of 18 per building. If any developer comes and tells you that it's more than 18, ask them why their data centers are run so much less efficiently than the ones in Northern Virginia. And they'll hem and haw and say, well, I don't know, I'll get back to you. The real numbers always work better. Indirect economic benefit. Data centers do not attract anything except more data centers. They don't attract supply chain businesses, they don't have employees, so there's no housing being built to support the employees because there aren't any. they're one of the worst commercial properties with respect to indirect economic benefit. So if you're doing this because you want to extend water and sewer someplace, and you want to queue up other businesses to take advantage of the infrastructure that's been built, it doesn't happen. It doesn't happen in any of the communities I've seen, and I've looked long and hard over the last 6 months to try to find a place where data centers have landed and development has sprung up around it. That map right there is West Des Moines, Iowa, which is growing fairly rapidly. It is just not growing anywhere near the Microsoft data center campus. That is 15 years after that campus started, and there is nothing nearby except the golf course. This one's becoming my biggest topic, my biggest concern for small communities or any communities where these are being built. Communities are not ready with their zoning for these. Data centers are a new thing. They're unlike any other construction that we have in any of our traditional zoning uses. Using the example of a house, the building of a house is a nuisance. It's much more of a nuisance than the actual people living in the house, unless you have terrible neighbors. But when you tolerate building a house for a few months, maybe a little more than that, then somebody moves in and you're fine, no big deal. Data center campus construction can last for 10 years, and it is easily described as heavy industrial. And if you want to see it firsthand, go to Mount Pleasant, see the Microsoft campus, go to Port Washington, or go to Beaver Dam and look at it firsthand. It is heavy trucks rumbling up and down the road all day, every day. It's earth movement, it's foundation driving. It is as invasive a construction activity as you can imagine. You would not put a heavy industrial plant next to a school, next to a subdivision, next to a hospital. Why would we ever do that for a data center? So people are looking at a data center and saying, it's just a building with servers in it. It's not really much of a nuisance, and they call it light industrial. That's the wrong place to focus the attention. The right place to focus the attention is on the construction. It's 10 years long. That's not a nuisance that our zoning should visit upon people that live nearby, but yet we're doing it. And the people in Port Washington and Mount Pleasant will tell you that was a mistake. Tax breaks. Simple answer here, don't do it. In the old days, back when we had our wits about us, tax breaks were given to companies who actually moved productive businesses here. Businesses that had employees, businesses that generated an indirect economic benefit and direct economic benefit. And we made a deal that you brought your business here, you set up shop here, and you generated enough indirect economic benefit to pay for the tax breaks that you got. All of a sudden, we've lost that connection. We're paying somebody to bring a building here, huge building, we get some temporary benefit from the construction, and then after that, no employees, no secondary businesses, no home development, nothing. And yet we're giving them, in the case of our state, 3 active projects are getting roughly $1 billion in tax breaks. It's absolutely criminal. And everybody in this room, if you all lived in Wisconsin anyway, you'd be paying for that $1 billion. Because that's revenue that we've lost. Why are we even entertaining them? We should be flipping that script and saying, you want our land? You're paying. You want to build a big building here that doesn't have employees, that doesn't generate economic activity? No, we're not giving you tax breaks. We have all the leverage as the small community because we have the land. We need to flip that script and do negative tax breaks. So I've been asked a lot, if you think we need to build these things, where should we build them? My biggest financial risk on here is that concentration risk. A small community with $1 million worth of property tax revenue can't take $3 million in tax revenue from a large single company in a single volatile industry and expect that to end well. That's just a bad place to be. So very simply, requirement number 1 that I have for where these things belong is a community that's large enough to absorb that loss of taxes. What happens if we lose 50% of it and it's 60% of our revenue? Well, that's bad. What if it's 3% of our revenue, tax revenue, and we lose 50% of the value? That's something that a small community, larger community could tolerate. It's painful still because it's still a lot of money, But if you don't put these things in a community that can handle the fluctuation of the valuation and the fluctuation of the tax revenue, you're just simply asking for trouble. So I think the technology industry has a problem. They're building them too big. They're going after small communities, and they're putting way too much risk on the small communities. And frankly, they don't care because they don't care what happens in 10 years. They're worried about what's happening now, and everybody's in this gold rush race to AI, and you want to be there first. And the communities are not in their calculation. They just don't care. They just want to get past the starting line and build. The other place that could tolerate these is a place that wants to do a lot of them. And there are communities, there's several in Oregon that have decided, we're all in. We want to be Data Center Alley out west. And they're building them like crazy. And they're drunk on the semi-permanent construction benefit. Hey, if that's what you want to do, and you've laid out all the pros and you've laid out all the cons and you've mitigated those risks as best you can for your residents, more power to you. It's an eyes wide open decision, and they've decided to go for it, and I wish them Godspeed. But the whole theme of this is force your elected leaders to do their due diligence. Don't just look at one number. Don't just look at a revenue number and think that it's going to be really easy to get there and it's going to stay there forever. There are so many scenarios getting there and so many scenarios afterwards, and if they're not laid out in a really concise way and sold to you as appropriate mitigants to keep the village from being overrun by that financial risk, then they're doing you all a disservice. That's what I found in my community. That's why I got really mad and fought back. And that's why I'm running around the upper Midwest to try to help you people do the job that a lot of elected leaders aren't doing because they're just simply enamored by a dollar. And I wish you the best of luck trying to educate people, but there is a ton of risk here behind that big fat dollar amount. And my belief is you need to jump up and down on a chair and make them see it and make them answer to it. And the moratorium, wherever that moratorium is done, that is a fantastic maneuver because it allows you to have this conversation and allows you to hold them accountable and keep them honest and make them explain to you why it's good for you. Thank you.
I'm not at all worried about following these two. I'm not nervous at all about that. Let's see here. I gotta get my slides up. Am I pushing the wrong button, maybe? There we go. Okay. Better grab my notes. I've got notes too because I tend to get off track as well. So thank you all for coming out and spending some of your evening. It makes me feel really good to see so many people organize and get together for something that you're so concerned about. And for everybody who put this event together, Charlie, Prescott, you guys were great, and I'm really happy to be here. So my name's Scott. I work for the Citizens Utility Board, and CUB is a not-for-profit utility watchdog and consumer advocacy organization. We were started by the General Assembly in the early 80s. They passed the CUB Act, which started our organization. I know it's hard to see the screen, but that's what they gave us the job of doing. We're advocates for utility ratepayers. And data centers have swallowed me whole for the last 2 months in our entire organization, really. We get calls, a lot of calls from people calling in saying, are these data centers going to make my energy bills go up? So that's what I'm here to address tonight. And in order to do that, I want to give everybody an understanding of how all of this works, like with our energy systems, our utility systems, how we value, how energy gets a value put on it, and why a data center may or may not cause that value or that price to go up. So now there we go. Oh, now we're going the other direction. What do you push it on? Where are we at? Oh,
Like two.
I went to, let's go back to one. I can't see it on the screen there. So I want to acknowledge though up front that this issue that I'm going to talk about with bills is one small slice of the concerns that I hear from people all over the state having. I want to acknowledge that and acknowledge that to fix those concerns, there are many jurisdictions. So all of you have been doing really great work showing up at city council meetings or county board meetings. But to solve some of these other problems, it's going to take state action, legislation. So if there's one thing that you take away from anything I say tonight, it is be prepared also to call your state representative or your state senator. I know that's difficult because they also have stars in their eyes when they see the revenue that data centers are going to bring in, but they need to hear from their constituents. And I can tell you also that the General Assembly is already underway for this legislative session, and data centers have been working our elected officials in Springfield for 2 years on this issue. And I can tell you from firsthand experience, they do not share your concerns. Their number one priority is Illinois needs to get rid of its Biometric Information Privacy Act so that they can do business here. That is their main concern. Their main concern is that we're going to cause them to have to bring their own energy. Those are their concerns. They are not worried about how much of a disruption this is to your lives. So, with that out of the way, get to this next part here. And this is a question we get at CUB most often. Is this going to cause my bills to go up? I won't build suspense. The answer is yes. But we need to dig a little bit deeper into that, because I know that all of you have heard things from data centers, right? You've heard claims that they've made about, we'll pay our own way, and this might even cause your bills to go down. In order to evaluate that, though, that's why I want to kind of explain how this system works. And then when you hear those claims at the next city council, the next county board meeting, you can kind of go back in your head and think about, wait a minute, is that actually how electricity works and utilities work? So we'll start at the top, and this is the grid. You can see here how dense all these poles and wires and everything is, especially in the Mid-South and the Midwest and on the East Coast. And Texas has a grid, it's just not, it's a little bit separate from the rest of the grid. But so this is what our grid looks like. And I think the point that I want to make here is that no city or county or state or region is an island in its own utility world. We're all connected to the same grid. So things that happen in Maine could potentially affect us here in Illinois. Things that happen in Indiana. We take a zoom in just a little bit, and our grid is broken up into different regions. And they are controlled by what we're going to refer to as, or I'm going to refer to as, a grid operator. And I'm going to talk about what those grid operators do. But you notice on here that Illinois is 2 different colors. All of us down this way are in what we call it MISO. I'm going to call it MISO. It's the Mid-Continent. I don't know, somebody got it messed up there. It's the Mid-Continent Independent System Operator. They are our grid operator in this part of the state. Northern Illinois, it's another grid, PJM, which I don't think stands for anything anymore. It used to stand for Pennsylvania, Jersey, and Maryland, I believe. So those grid operators are kind of an important piece of our story here, because they have a big impact on how much we will end up paying on our electric bills. Their main job is to make sure that there is enough energy on our grid and that it's being transmitted from where it's generated to where it's going to be used. They also, it's their job to make sure and to plan that transmission lines are being built. And they allocate the cost for that. So when we need transmission lines, you go back to that image and you see that transmission lines, they don't stay within one state or one region. They go across states, they go across the country. Those grid operators are responsible for figuring out when we need to build those and who's going to pay for it. And the third function they serve, which is probably most important for us, is they run energy markets. So we need to create a market where people who make electricity can sell it to people who need electricity. And it is the job of MISO and these grid operators to make sure that those markets function. We're going to be talking about two products that are sold on those markets that we're most concerned with, and that's energy and capacity. So energy, you can think about energy as a power plant. Let's say that I'm a 100 megawatt power plant, and I can make 100 megawatts of energy if I need to. But on a day like today, where there's no severe weather, everything's pretty mild, that power plant doesn't need to be running at 100 megawatts. It runs at 20 or 30 or 40 megawatts, and that lets us turn the lights on. But you can, on a really hot day, this summer, June, July, August, September, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, 5 o'clock in the afternoon, that normal operation of a power plant is no longer going to work for us because everybody's turning on their air conditioner. People are getting home from work, they're turning on their air conditioner. And now suddenly we have this huge spike in demand for electricity. So that capacity market that MISO runs is to ensure that we don't just have enough electricity to meet that highest spike. We want to make sure that we have 15 or 30% more than that, so that if we misgauge how big this spike is going to be, we don't crash our grid. So what the grid operator does in this situation is they take everything they know about their footprint, this MISO footprint that we're in the green here. And they say, here's how much demand we have, here's how much energy we can make in our territory, and based on all of these complex models and weather and all of this stuff, here's what we estimate we might need for that headroom, that capacity. And they take that to all the power generators in their territory, and they say, here's what we think we're going to need for this summer. Now, if I'm that 100 megawatt plant, I say, I will bid into that. I will promise you that I can ramp up when you call on me to meet that peak. And they go around, all the other power plants can bid into that also, they set the price. And under normal circumstances, that price is relatively affordable. Affordability means something different these days, but it's relatively affordable. And so you can probably see where we're heading here, that when we have markets and we have supply and we have demand, and you have these gigantic electricity sponges in a data center, and you drop that in, and it sucks up a lot of electricity, that's going to make these markets kind of go a little haywire, right? The grid operator is not really going to know what to do about that, because it's not like you can just start building power plants tomorrow and have them finished next week. It takes a long time to build power plants. So we'll come back to the question of, do data centers cause bills to increase? And they already have. How many people remember opening, if you're an Ameren customer, you opened your Ameren bill last maybe July or August, and you noticed a pretty big price increase? Yeah. Well, this explains why that happened. These two graphs, the one on the right-hand side of the screen, that is the MISO capacity auction from last summer. And you can see that just prior to that, in early spring, into spring, MISO ran those auctions, and something happened there. And it caused our prices to go, those capacity prices, to go from $34 per megawatt day to $666.50 or something per megawatt day. Same thing happened up in Northern Illinois' grid too. And everybody panicked about this, and what is causing this? What is causing this? So I put this quote on here from the PJM Grid Market Monitor. Their job, they're an independent third-party organization that evaluates these energy markets, watches what the grid operator does, and makes critiques about them, or translates this to the public and reports on it. And the PJM Market Monitor blamed those huge spikes you see primarily on data centers. That though isn't the entire story, but it is a big part of the story. So I want to kind of talk through some of these other factors that do impact our electric bills. So we do have a lot of environments, not just in MISO, but across the entire country. Coal plants especially are retiring, gas plants are retiring, and the energy to power those, or to replace those, isn't coming online quick enough. The reason that we can't get that energy online quick enough is because MISO hasn't done its job very well at that transmission plan. So we're about 10 years behind on building the transmission lines that we need to hook up, because now, we build gas plants, nobody builds coal plants anymore. We built a lot of wind and solar, and those were scattered out all over the place. Not like it was when you just had a coal plant here, and a nuclear plant here, and a gas plant here, and another coal plant. Now it's like solar, wind. So we need to get that energy from where it's being generated to where it's being used. And we can't do that because we're behind on transmission. That has led to a massive amount in Illinois, a massive amount of solar that is built or contracted to be built that is sitting unenergized because they can't connect to the grid. Solar and wind are also variable. So that capacity market, if I'm that 100 megawatt plant and I bid into that market and MISO calls me up and says, you got to turn on, we're expecting this huge spike, I can do that if I'm a gas plant. More or less coal plant, nuclear plant, but you can't do that with wind and solar. They get a low capacity score. Until you pair them with batteries, and then they get really, really high capacity scores. They outperform gas and coal. But the problem is, with all of this, again, is that we're seeing this unprecedented load growth. After 20 or so years of seeing flat load across the country, we're not seeing these huge spikes. Now we have this huge spike that could potentially come in the next couple of years. Prescott, I think you said it takes 3-5 years to build a data center. It takes about 7 years to build a gas plant. Under the best conditions, it takes, I'll get to this example next, but nuclear takes a long time to build that. The only thing that we can build quickly enough to match the speed of data centers potentially coming online is wind and solar, and we can't connect those to the grid right now. We have a problem with that. So yes, data centers are driving this demand, and that's sort of one half. That explains our electricity prices. But Prescott also talked about, and Charlie too, about these huge operations that come in the utility now. Ameren has an obligation to serve these data centers, right? As long as they do all their paperwork right. Now Ameren's got to build a whole bunch of infrastructure out, poles and wires and transformers and substations. That stuff is really expensive. And those costs get spread out to all of us Ameren customers. So that gets us to this next point. I did want to address some of the things that I've heard about. What happened to it? Some of the things that I have heard quite a bit about. Man, where is it? Maybe I hit that slide. And either way. Well, I had a slide on here. I wanted to kind of address some of the things that people have been telling me that data centers have been saying. And one of those is that we'll pay for our own costs for infrastructure. It's not going to cost anybody anything. But that's not the way that it works in Illinois, because we don't have a system in place where a data center can write a check to the utility. All of that stuff is governed, those interconnections are governed by utility tariffs. And that's not the tariff in the way that we've thought about it for the last couple of years. A tariff are the rules of the road for any customer that's going to connect to a utility. And we are not set up in this state to have some handshake deal between the data center and the utility to say, oh, we'll cover the cost of all that infrastructure, don't worry about it. So I don't know when data centers say that they will cover that cost. I don't know how that's going to happen. Unless we make, we change our tariffs. I also hear a lot about the coal plant thing. I've heard this quite a bit that, well, it's actually that we're closing too many coal plants. our laws, most of the time people are referring to a law that passed in 2021 that doesn't cause any coal plants to close until 2030. The coal plants that have closed have been because the people who own those coal plants don't make money off of them. That's why they're closing coal plants. We did see an instance just recently in northern Indiana utility where they were forced to keep their coal plant open because of the data center. Now it's costing them for 90 days about $20 million. So Northern Indiana utility says, we're not paying that. We were trying to retire this thing, and the government told us to keep it open. So we're not paying that. You need to make everybody in MISO's territory pay for that. So this article is linked here, and my email address, if anybody wants to get a hold of me, I'll send you these slides. This article that is written in here is talking from the Chicago Tribune, is talking about the impacts that this could potentially have on us for a data center. We're paying for the power of a data center in Indiana. The whole thing about EVs, that is kind of on its face ridiculous, and I'm not going to talk about that. The nuclear plant thing, like I said, maybe one of these days nuclear plants are a solution to meet data center load. The last nuclear plant to open in the country took about 30 years to build from conception to opening. It doubled its budget, so $35 billion, which means that the power that's generated by that plant is so prohibitively expensive that, the Georgia and South Carolina are now suing each other over the cost of this plant. So that's not to say that nuclear will never, be able to match data center load. It's saying that if we had an assembly line of nuclear plants set up to start building them under the best conditions, 11 to 15 years to build one. So we cannot wait, or we cannot have data centers telling us that we'll come in and we'll pay for a nuclear plant. How are they going to build a nuclear plant in 3 years? How can they build a gas plant? You cannot get your hands on the mechanicals needed to build a gas plant in 5 to 7 years or so. So how are they going to do that? They're saying these things and they're not demonstrating any evidence whatsoever. So this is kind of what we have to look forward to, I think. This is according to MISO. This is the grid operator. This is their outlook for data centers. And I know this stuff is really hard to see, but they predict that data centers could potentially be the biggest load that they have to serve in their territory. Now, MISO and our utilities too, Ameren and ComEd, they know full well that not all of these data centers are going to be built. But MISO does not have the luxury, nor do the utilities have the luxury of rolling the dice and guessing, well, because if I'm a data center, I'm talking to 10 utilities in MISO's footprint in Wisconsin, in Illinois, Missouri, Indiana. I'm talking to all of them to see where I can get the best deal. Well, the utilities are reporting all of this back to the grid operator, and suddenly MISO is thinking, what is this data center going to build 10 data centers? Probably not, but they don't have the luxury of rolling the dice on that, because their job is to make sure that if the worst case scenario comes along, they're prepared for it. And that is exactly what is causing these markets to go crazy, is because we have a sort of inaccurate or over-reporting of data centers. And all of that combined, all of these factors combined, have led the grid operators to do what they can to put out a call for people to build more power generation. But like I said, we cannot build power generation fast enough. So I would like to say that for everybody who's been involved at the local level, thank you for doing that work. I know it takes up a huge amount of time. Keep pushing for those stricter ordinances and no non-disclosure agreements between the data center and any city official or elected officials. But at some point too, we are going to have to let our lawmakers, state lawmakers, know how we feel about this, because they are very tempted. There's a staggering amount of money being spent in Illinois by the data center lobby, especially as campaign season, right? A lot of money being thrown around. The only way that we can counter that is like with our constituent voices calling our lawmakers. And my organization, we're part of a larger coalition. We also have legislation proposed. And this is what This is what we believe needs to be in place to protect the people of Illinois. If there's no way that we can shut this down entirely, we need to make sure that we are as protected as possible. Making sure that we have our rules set up so that they do pay their own way. And if they're gonna locate in Illinois, they have to bring their own energy and capacity. They cannot push those costs on. They can't sponge up all of our electricity and cause our bills to go up. They have to build their own. The data centers are not happy about this. And they will start thrashing in a few months when they start hearing these proposals. And then it will be legislators negotiating with different parties and data centers, and it will probably get pretty contentious. So again, if there's anything you take away, it's just know that fight is coming. Sally over here has a fact sheet with more detail on that legislation if you'd like to get it, but I would say, that's, I thought my email address is my email address. I don't know what's going on with these slides, but come talk to me if you want a copy of these slides, and I will make sure that you get them. I'll send them to you in an email, or you guys have them as well.
Can you share your email address?
It's supposed to be on the screen now. I don't know why I'm not getting my last slide up there.
Do you know it?
I do know it, yes.
Okay.
On their Facebook page.
It is.
Can the coalition post the information on their Facebook page?
Okay, perfect. I don't know what's going on with the slides. I apologize for that, but thank you all for listening to me talk about this. I feel very passionate about it, even though I have not been in this fight but maybe a year and a half. And again, thank you all for doing the work that you're doing out there.
I have a question for Scott.
Yes.
Looking forward to your presentations tomorrow night.
What's that?
The Old Bakery Beer Company
Yeah.
with a scarecrow.
Yeah.
We hope to watch the company, Old Bakery Beer Company, and hear Scott talk more in detail with a better Wi-Fi system.
Chris, what time does it start? Not paid to say that.
6:30. Okay. But come at 5:30, and get yourself a hamburger.
I will.
And then a libation. All kinds of libations.
So this is the Q&A portion. Please take advantage of it. So we want this to be a conversation. If you're comfortable speaking, please come up to the microphone. That way everybody can hear the question. If you're not comfortable speaking, we have people walking around with index cards. You're holding the baskets up right there. So just find one of them, write your question down, and we'll have the speakers ask you. And I think how you just approached it, you guys come up with some swagger.
Howdy, my name is Jack. I live just right down the road. Charlie, glad to see you. First time, long time. So just to kind of get into things, I'm a data guy. I love analysis. I love numbers. I love psychology, all this good stuff. Getting into the psychology of the people that are going to try and bring this here. So tech industry, currently one of the fastest rising, 14% of all new billionaires are in the tech industry. They're responsible for most of the top 10 billionaires in the planet. You've done a really good job of showing how much we have to give for these people to make more money. Has there ever, does anybody know about this? Has there ever in your experience been a profit share conversation about sharing the profits of this? Or do we just give all this stuff and then they just keep getting it? And there's a lot of union people in here now. I know that. So just out of curiosity, have they ever proposed maybe sharing a little bit of this wealth, or is it just we give all of us all of our resources and they just keep it for themselves?
I've never seen any suggestion of profit share from the companies to the communities.
I'm shocked. Thank you guys for your time.
I'm Kay from Trenton, and my question is about, okay, they built all these things in one center in Oregon. Isn't that a real problem for defense? I mean, one big boom and they're gone.
Well, there are several thousand data centers in the country, so it would take a lot of booms to really cause a lot of damage, but at some point, a concentration of data centers does attract military attention. I wouldn't want to live in Northern Virginia if a big war broke out with somebody with intercontinental ballistic missiles. But, yeah, you'd really have to have hundreds of them to be a serious threat.
Well, then my other question, if I may, the wastewater, where does all that go? Does it go back to my farm field, which is already being heavily polluted?
So the data center industry believes closed loop systems will quote unquote solve the water problem, but it doesn't quite solve the water problem because of what you're alluding to. They do use a lot less water in these systems. They might use more upstream and you don't know about it. But anyway, specific to the data center, they're filling up the cooling systems with water like you fill up a radiator. It's the chemicals in the water that they're using to treat the water that are still the open question. And I don't have the answer to that. I just know that it's an open question.
Well, I sure thank you all for coming tonight. Thank you so much.
So could one of you or Scott talk about virtual power plants and how that can reduce utility bills and also large load tariffs?
So virtual power plants, if we could get a data center to participate in a virtual power plant, that would definitely be beneficial. The way virtual power plants work is that you have batteries in your houses. You could let the utility dispatch some of the power from your batteries to help knock down those huge peaks. But that assumes that data centers have a whole lot of battery storage behind the meter, which I don't know if that's typical of a data center to supply itself and have a bunch of storage. Probably not going to be helpful unless we require that of them. Yes?
So we normally have to play on how many actual units of So it does depend on how many UPS battery systems that data center does have. However, there is the issue with your MPS hypercare going back into the utility feed. It will blow a system if you do feed back into that. Now, if there's a way to correct, then yes, it would be possible to feed that battery usage back into the grid.
Right, and so we want to be set up for that. And on the large load tariffs, that would refer to our investor-owned utilities, our Ameren and our ComEd, writing these rules of the road for how cost is allocated and all of this stuff, and getting it passed by the state utility regulator. And ultimately, that is what we are going to need if we want to define how much of the cost data centers have to pay versus how much we have to pay.
My name is Jason Murphy. I live in Godfrey. And actually, one of my questions was already kind of somewhat answered with the closed loop system when it comes to the types of chemicals that they're using. And pretty much the answer was it's pretty unknown. But in a lot of closed loop cooling systems, the primary chemicals that are generally used are either ethylene or propylene glycol. And I actually come from somewhat of a hazmat background. I have my hazmat technician certification, so I know how much paperwork and how closely monitored hazmat is usually. Now, we know how a lot of larger companies can kind of skirt some of those rules sometimes, and when they're bringing in all this water and treating it with either propylene or ethylene glycol, who's holding them responsible or accountable for actually getting rid of it? And you kind of answered a little bit somewhat on my question on that, but.
I'll clarify, the chemicals they're using are not known by me.
Okay.
You probably know more about it than I do if you're in that business of hazardous materials, but I just know of it as a topic that has not yet reached the point of agreement across the debate.
Okay. And so since I kind of brought it up, either propylene or ethylene is usually used, and ethylene is generally more toxic of the glycols, and it's really bad stuff. Like you're saying, like a lot of PFAS and PFOS are going into water and stuff like that. That's what's being dumped into our rivers too, and that's pretty much car coolant is what it is mostly. And I haven't heard anything on the regulations for how they're going to get rid of this stuff when they have to recycle the system, because they're saying that, oh, it's going to use less water. Well, there's a whole bunch of water now that's being completely unusable now. So I don't know if you heard anything on that.
I'm not an expert in this, but one thing is I was talking to a buddy of mine who works at a water treatment facility, and they don't know how to get rid of the PFAS. I mean, reverse osmosis is one way, but it's very expensive. Oh, he was ordering a drink, but it's.
That's my next thing.
Miller Lite's not the answer here with PFAS, but it's very expensive. In Wisconsin, we have so much PFAS that, again, the fish have it. You can't eat the fish, so there's not a good way to get it out currently with the current technology, unless somebody knows different. So where they take it, I don't know. I know if it goes to a standard wastewater treatment facility, that's a problem for all of us. So.
And then I apologize. I have one more question real quick, and this is kind of a new thing that I just recently read. But Microsoft just recently bought 3 Mile Island. Well, one of the reactors at 3 Mile Island. They're planning on reopening it. So we're talking about companies making their own power for data centers. What do you guys know about Microsoft purchasing one of the reactors for 3 Mile Island?
I don't know a ton about that, except that they did purchase it. I don't know the details of how they're going to make that work. I imagine they have the money to unmothball that plant and make it work. In Illinois, we had a similar situation where one of the nuclear plants in Clinton, I think it was Meta, they made a deal with Meta. But that is not to get generation from the plant, it's to buy the zero emissions credits that the state is no longer going to purchase. So that is not going to solve our problem here for sure. It is not going to, that power plant is not going to produce energy, especially for that data center. They're just selling them attributes.
So it kind of seems like private companies are buying nuclear reactors and private companies are obtaining nuclear power, which is what it sounds like.
Yeah, and there's a lot of talk about, again, plants that have shut down, retired, that there's nothing that says that a data center can't make a deal with pay all the costs of that power plant as long as you can get permitted to do that. And yeah, not really. I mean, to power a data center, that a hyperscale data center that large would take an incredible amount of power and capacity. So.
Awesome. Thank you guys very much.
Hi, my name is Tracy, and you didn't speak anything about why data centers are choosing small communities. I'd be interested in your thoughts on that.
The two attributes that modern hyperscale data center needs are a large amount of contiguous land and proximity to power. That's it. And that's the most convenient way for them to build buildings right now is very, very large.
Okay.
As long as they continue to find land and willing communities, they're not going to change that model.
Okay.
But that's why they're in small communities, because those two attributes they can find there for the cheapest price possible.
Okay. Okay. The other question I have is we had a proposal where is it on? Is it on? Okay. I'm just not speaking into it. Okay. We had a proposal, a small data center that was going to provide their own solar power. They were going to build a solar field along with battery backup, and may even send power back to the grid. I wonder what your thoughts about the feasibility of that, or if it's
At a large scale?
it was going to be a smaller one. It was going to be like a 5 megawatt, so really pretty small, a couple of those.
Yeah,
I mean,
maybe that'll work at a really small scale, but a 1 gigawatt data center would need one hell of a lot of solar panels and batteries.
I thought it was maybe conceptual and not probably feasible, but that's what we were told. So, okay, thank you.
Hello, my name is Nathaniel. I'm from Troy, where we just stopped a proposal in our community to open a data center. And I'll try to talk into the microphone a little more. Is that better? Okay. And I was wondering if there's any state that you're aware of that has any kind of bills or proposed legislation that would be good for us to emulate or support in regards to responsible data center development and operation.
No, they're all terrible. All the ones I've seen, that's not a large number, by the way. I've seen most of the bills that have been passed by the legislature are actually creating the problem of data center developers juicing their frequent flyer miles accounts to Wisconsin and Ohio and Illinois. They're part of the problem. And now that the issue has become somewhat of a third rail political topic, political parties are jumping in to try to pretend they're doing something. And so far, I've not seen any bills submitted that really address the problem, because they're not really addressing the problem that created all of the crazy demand in the first place. They need to take the incentives out that are causing them to swoop in and try to quickly pick up 2,000 acres here and there. Yeah, I've not seen anything helpful yet.
I have a follow-up question. Is there have you seen any kind of roadmap, maybe by an NGO or a think tank, that is good to look at as possible something for us in the community to be aware of?
For legislation?
Yes.
No, but I'm going to look, because I know there are lots of playbook type documents that have come out from various organizations. I just have not looked too deeply into the policy prescription part of that. But it's obviously all going to be sort of state by state. Maybe there's a pattern there that will work across state boundaries, but I'll take a look and see what I can find.
Thank you very much.
Hi, my name is Christopher Teague. I'm a Troy resident. Just an observation real quick is I wanted to say that Central and Southern Illinois has some of the finest farmland anywhere in the country. It's unique in the fact that not only is it very good soil for a lot of different crops, but it doesn't require center pivots. You don't have to irrigate this land because we are blessed with abundant rainfall, and it's just ideal for farmland. We're covering up a lot of it with Amazon warehouses, and that's a whole separate little kind of thing I don't like. But I was wanting to know just one more fact about the closed loop cooling system. I was watching Aaron Brockovich, and they were talking about hexavalent chromium, and that was using a closed loop cooling system where they're putting hexavalent chromium into the water to prevent rust on the cooling towers, and it was being held in outside ponds, and then that was what was poisoning the communities. So, and they considered that to be a closed loop system, because the cooling pond, the water was reused back into the plant. So are we talking about that, where the closed loop system could be an open pond with some of these maybe forever chemicals on the God's best land, you know, for growing crops? Or are we talking about something that's safer than that, where maybe the cooling water is not open to the atmosphere to this area? Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
I think it's really closed. Like, it doesn't go out into a pod and come back in. I think it stays inside the loop, but periodically, on a multi-year basis, they have to remove it and dispose of it. And beyond that, really super high level understanding, I got nothing for you.
Okay. I know even with nuclear reactors, they're closed loops. They have hot radioactive water within the plant, but then they use a pond and then they cool that to bring into and then the hot water goes back out into a standing pond, so it cools off naturally. But even that, it doesn't match, even that is not like perfectly clean. I know that doesn't work perfectly correct. And as much flatness as we have here and much rainfall that we get, I just worry about things from that leaking out into overflow. I worry about I guess that's what it is. I worry about overflow. All right, last question I had is, we have our state representative, Charlie Meyer, I believe, Republican. I just wanted to know, maybe not you guys, but maybe somebody from the audience here, where does he stand on this? And what can we, if we need to influence him, we probably need to know that. And what would be the best way maybe to influence him one way or the other, in your opinion?
Well, I'm not aware what Representative Meyer's position is on this. I'm sure some constituents out there.
I would call him. I've called him twice and he keeps referring me back to our here in Troy.
Referring you back to whom?
Charlie Myers, his office is referring me back to our alderman in Troy. He says he has nothing to do with it, so I've tried twice.
So he has no opinion.
I don't get to talk to him again, and somebody else calls me back and tells me that that's.
Do you have sales and use tax exemption here for data centers?
Yes.
Then he's part of the problem.
We have a tax.
He's got a lot to do with it.
Well, he's a permanent resident of Washington County in Highland. He's a farmer. I think we need to push that button. Anyway, thanks, guys.
Just real quick to, on your question there, a lot of lawmakers don't know. They don't know about half the stuff going on. Some lawmakers just do the party line and then move on. So, especially if you guys give them a call and educate them on that can go a long way. It's a complicated thing. A lot of them do not know. Some of them do and they're full of shit. But full of stuff, sorry. My mom will be mad, it's fine. But, so just give them a call. It's about
Let's put it down the line. If it's about money, politicians really don't care because we have to start the problem. If they get enough money, they ain't gonna do shit. It's all about money. Go ahead.
So my name is Judine Lux, and I have been a local realtor in the area now for my 36th year. I know I don't look anywhere near old enough to have been working that long even, but taking your job, not really. So I really kind of got involved in this really maybe less than a week ago. I put a video on Facebook that garnered 26,000 views so far. Something that has just basically blown me away. And so you know how Facebook works. So it becomes an algorithm. And all of a sudden now Facebook is sending you everything. And you're getting all kinds of information. Like in San Antonio, we have an aquifer that is depleted of water that they have used for cooling of a data center that's in the area. My greatest concern, yes, my utility bill going up is up there, but water is life. If we don't have water, what are we going to do? I mean, because here's the thing, we're giving away our very resource that we need. And you mentioned PFAS PFAS in Collinsville right now. You cannot sell a home in Collinsville without disclosing that the PFAS level is too high. And so they're working on trying to clean up the water, and they have like 5 years to work on that. But it's very concerning to me to think that we're going to further contaminate. You're contaminating fish, wildlife, human beings. And yeah, I love mentioning Aaron Brockovich. My son-in-law made a joke about that I was Che Guevara or something, and I was like, no, I want to be Aaron Brockovich. I want to shine a light and be that person who says, look, we can't let them have our every resource. And it concerns me that we have anybody who works in government for any of us that is not, that we're not just bombarding the hell out of these people. I mean, we need to let them know. So Granite City has a meeting. That's where I'm from. I'm from Granite City. We have a meeting tomorrow night, mayor speaker series. So we get to learn a little bit, but everybody seems to be for this. And now you get people reaching out to you because when you're not for it, they don't understand why you don't like it, because it's going to bring money. So, and again, it is about the money, and I do understand, but I would hope that more and more people are fighting for their kids, their grandkids. I don't have grandkids. I'm not getting grandkids, but I care about everybody else's kids and grandkids, because what are we going to do if we don't take care of our situation with our water? That's more important than even the power. And that's important.
My name is Sylvia Cuny. I grew up on a farm on the other side of the river. So I'll contest that, or admit that you do have a little bit better soil, but we managed to grow some pretty good crops as well. I grew up driving a tractor and eventually a combine. And my hometown did all the things that you said not to do. Our county commissioners signed NDAs, signed contracts, and the community knew nothing. So right now, there is now a 5,000 acre mega site. Amazon is going to have 900 and something acres under roof. Google's getting a bit nervous about the public unrest, so we'll see how big theirs actually becomes. We're trying to do things like a lawsuit and force it to a vote, all the things. And I worry about a lot of things, but I have a question that hasn't really been talked about. Obviously, I'm worried about the water. I'm worried about the power. I'm worried that 80% of the people in my county are on well water, and I think their wells are going to go dry or be contaminated. My family's included. But I wonder, once we put all of this farmland, this is farmland, it's been farmland forever. Once we put it under roof, it'll never be farmland again. In my lifetime, I can remember as a child, our first computer was enormous. And what it could actually do was minuscule compared to what the phone in my back pocket can do. So during my lifetime, the computing technology, the physical size that it takes up has gone from enormous to fitting in my back pocket. So once they build this absolute monstrosity of a building, do you have any real sense of how quickly, like obviously I know obsolescence, these GPUs in 3 years' time, they're obsolete. But will the newer generations be so much more efficient and take up less space that these gigantic buildings themselves will become obsolete?
Yeah, absolutely.
And do you have any insight at all into how quickly?
I have a ton of insight into this. So the shortest term, the reason they're building so many of them and so big is because everybody looks at artificial intelligence in the industry and says, oh my God, we can do so much with this. We need to put it in every product. And it's currently a very expensive operation in terms of computing requirements. So they do the math. If I have to put something everywhere that's really expensive, I need a lot of computers to do it. And because the timeline is so long, they're getting started now. But the first thing that's going to happen is that some software developer is going to come along and make artificial intelligence as an hour cheaper. And the industry will have to reset and say, do we still need to build all those ones we haven't built yet? Maybe they'll stop halfway. Or maybe we'll fix the algorithm after we've built too many, and now we don't need as many, and now they're worth a little bit less money on the open market when somebody tries to sell them. I think that's a huge risk. It has happened. Software continues to get more efficient all the time, which is why you can do so much. And the hardware gets more efficient, the software gets more efficient. And the industry reinvents itself all the time, trying to get more efficient, save money, do things on smaller footprint, etc. There's something weird going on with AI because it's such an expensive operation right now, and the timeline to build the physical computing capacity is so long. They're literally betting their farm on building $2.5 trillion worth of data centers. It's going to blow up. I have no doubt. I just don't know when, and nobody knows when, and that's why all these tech companies are throwing these projects against the wall to try to build as fast as they possibly can because they don't want to lose the race. But there's a massive risk to what is being built in your backyard being unneeded at some near-term date, where near-term could be 2 to 15 years.
Yeah, unfortunately, I had 2 follow-up questions, and I think you just answered one of them. We're doing a lawsuit, we're trying to force a public vote, we're doing all these things that are just stall tactics. My personal goal in this is that we're gonna stall long enough that they don't see a need for our location anymore. But I don't know how long that is going to be. And I guess nobody does.
I don't envy you.
Yeah. And then
it makes me sad that you're in that position where hope is your strategy.
It is, and
there's just no timeline. I can't even guess what the timeline is. I just know the whole industry is built around constantly trying to fix that problem, no matter where we are in the cycle. And at some point, the musical chairs game the music has to stop.
And I'm basically monetizing hope to fundraise, to pay for lawyers, and to pay for putting a billboard up on the interstate, because I want Amazon to feel physical discomfort when they come in to meet with our commissioners. I want them to see this huge billboard we're putting up. And I want yard signs in every yard. We're selling merchandise. We're making stickers, we're making hats, we're making all the things. I heard a couple of really great quotes tonight. Would anybody be opposed to one of their quotes being on a sticker that I sell? Any opposition?
You can quote me anytime you want.
Lovely. Can I quote you on the wolf and the dog and licking your face? Because I will. I'll put it on a great sticker. This is Montgomery County, Missouri. It's unfortunately the small town of New Florence is going to be truly surrounded by data centers. I cannot imagine living there. My family's farm is far enough away that we won't physically hear it, but I do still worry about the impacts to my community. Thank you.
If I could interrupt, I wanted to ask a couple of questions from the audience. So one of the questions that was written in was, is it accurate to say that any data centers built anywhere in our grid will make all of our prices go up? And yet we will have no benefits to our communities because they're so far away. And is that true unless they bring their own energy capacity?
Yeah, that's currently what's happening for us here in Illinois. It's both of those, but yes.
Another question that came through was, what are the restrictions for the moratoriums? What's the difference between a 6-month and a 12-month?
6 months.
Well, what makes a community pass the 6 month versus 12 month? We've heard locally that 6 months is as long as you can legally do it.
Well, at least locally, there's an Illinois Supreme Court case that said that 6 months is a reasonable period of time to have a moratorium in Illinois. So I think a lot of communities are just betting that that's a safe level. If we go 8 months, 12 months longer than that, perhaps you're inviting litigation. So there's at least a case on point. So 6 months seems to be where most people are landing.
And one last question is about the process. The question is from somebody from the city of Forestell, and what they want to know is after annexation, I guess, of the land, what happens after that in the process?
They kind of have to be the community, I would say. You know, where
I'm from the wrong state to answer that question.
Maybe that's part of the problem, is that nobody understands what's next. Go and ask the lawyer.
What was that question again?
So the question's kind of about the process of when the companies are coming in after the city has approved the annexation, or as after the land has been brought into the city. What happens from there? Is that in the proposal process, in the construction process? I don't know much to go on here, I'm guessing.
Well, I think every municipality is different. So you need to get in and learn about how your government works in whatever city you're in. But if you're thinking about, annexation, you want to watch the agendas that come out for the town meetings, the board meetings, so you can see what they're annexing. If they're going to act on something, they have to put in their agendas, start going to those meetings. Once they if they're annexing large property for a potential data center, you know it's going to be a lot of property. The reason they're annexing it in the city is so they can get the tax revenue from the data center. So watch the large swaths of land that are being annexed in, and make sure you pay attention to your local boards and the agendas that come out before every board meeting.
Hi, I'm Robin. First, thank you for everybody and Derek for setting up the website. I've been following the Troy activity since the second meeting. I was too late for the first meeting, and I do live close, so I would be within the 3-mile range, so I was concerned, so thank you. One question I have is, these contracts have to be very sophisticated. And this is not meant to be offensive to any elected official, but do we really have the people sitting on these boards that are qualified to read, understand, and the contracts and protect the citizens?
It is highly unlikely that you do.
And what resources would you suggest they reach out to? Do you know? I know this is fairly new, but it really makes me uncomfortable that someone that runs a small business would be signing a contract for something this big.
I agree. It's a fundamental part of the criticisms that I have of small communities trying to do this. They don't even know the answer to that question. Who should I talk to? They're in over their heads from the start, and they're not going to gather the right team. They might not be able to afford the right team.
Right.
But if you've never done a negotiation with a Fortune 50 company, you don't even. It's like you're playing a game. You don't know the rules. So they need lawyers, they need technology experts, they need construction experts, they need everything. They just don't think they have a problem, and they just negotiate the way they always do on moderately sized projects.
That's really scary. Do any of you know of an organized group to contact legislatures so that, I know there have been some petitions, I'm not sure where they've gone, but like letter writing, phone calling.
I have a snarky answer.
Us?
You
Yeah.
guys are tech companies, they know how to do it really well.
There is a person here, if she can stand up and wave her arms around loudly. Lori, who is trying to organize, there she is. Go talk to her because she is organizing people all across the state from the north to the south to do that.
Okay, great. And one last thing, kind of following up on the last lady that spoke. I watched your interview with this group earlier today. Could you talk a little bit about lack of usage when these data centers shut down and why they can't, like the buildings aren't going to be sold again for other uses?
Yeah,
You talk about.
They're very purpose-built buildings. They have low ceilings, no windows, lots of power, lots of cooling. And when the proposal hit my backyard, that was one of the early questions that we asked. We went out and asked commercial real estate experts, given the specs of this building, what could you possibly use it for? And they didn't have an answer. And they are, by literal definition, purpose-built for being a data center. And I do not see for the life of me what they're going to be used for. If they got to the worst case scenario where we had too many and you couldn't rent space in it. I think the more likely scenario that will happen is the value of them will drop. Or the company that owns them will be in the data center rental business and they'll say, hey, I'm only getting half the price that I used to for data center space now because this is an old stock old thing. And then they'll argue for a lower valuation and you'll have to give it to them. If they get a lower valuation, you get less tax revenue on them. So that's kind of like halfway between full tax revenue and zero tax revenue. But all of that whole spectrum of risks exists. Yeah, they're purpose built and for the specific use of putting a bunch of servers in them.
And just one comment, if anybody hasn't watched the video, it's worth watching. It's an hour and a half well invested. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Tess and I live in Highland, which is just that way a little bit. I want to second Lori. I know Lori, she's involved with Downstate PAC and Sierra Club, and she is doing great things in this area. I have noticed that the lady from Montgomery County in Missouri mentioned it, but I haven't heard any of you talk very much about air pollution or noise pollution. And the noise pollution is something that's really got me concerned, not only the high decibel levels, but the low level hum. Do you see a point where they're not using backup generators and we're not having this low level hum? I've seen mitigation for water. They can improve watersheds, they can restore waterways, they can do things like that. I've seen mitigations for electricity, they can build their own grid. None of these mitigations are working out in the contracts we have now, but they are potential mitigations. I haven't really seen anything for the noise, and I wonder if you could say anything about that.
What I know about noise is that at the property edge, it's usually about 45 decibels, which is like having a refrigerator humming next to your ear all the time. And as you get further away, that noise will dissipate. There's a mathematical formula that you use to calculate what it would be at half a mile, for example.
Yeah.
So if you're not in if you're not like in the middle of a neighborhood, literally in the middle of a neighborhood, it's probably relatively benign.
Okay, even for the environment?
The vibration
right.
from the noise, that's a different matter, and I'll claim some ignorance on that.
Okay.
I think the noise issue is, if you get into a situation where you're trying to change someone's mind, and you've got a city official, village official that thinks data centers are great, and you bring the noise issue to them, they're going to roll their eyes and say, yeah, I visited one in the middle of the day and it was fine, because the cars driving by are more louder. I think if you want to change their minds, you focus the conversation on the noise from the construction. And do not let them off the hook that these construction projects are 10 years long.
Right, temporary doesn't mean short.
Correct.
Yeah.
10 years is a semi-permanent use of the property, and the zoning regulations don't count for construction. And that's where this whole thing falls apart, particularly around the noise issue.
Okay. And then I did want to say one thing. I wasn't going to say this, but while I was standing in line, people were talking about politicians. I happen to be on the campaign committee for someone running for Congress. 2 months ago, he put on his website that he's calling for a moratorium on data centers. So if anybody's in the 15th, that's Randy Raley. Vote for him.
Hello, my name's Morgan, and I'm from Troy, and I'm actually Justin's wife. I just wanted to say, because I know they've been asking about politicians, that Justin and I had called Ron Simpson, who is a member of the county board in Madison County. And when we asked him what his position was, he basically said hemmed and hawed and he didn't know and whatnot, because he was kind of an older gentleman. And then he pointed us to the frequently asked questions on Madison County's website, which looked to be written straight from Cloverleaf's literature. So I would suggest calling your county board member and voicing your opinion to them.
Hi, I'm Katie. Somebody already commented from Forestell, Missouri, that's where I'm from, about the annexation piece. So we're currently at a phase where part of the property that this is being proposed is an unincorporated county, and then part is like within city limits. Do you guys have any thoughts about like we are trying to halt the annexation at this point, but really if that happens, are we doing anything, or will they just move forward and they'll have part in the unincorporated county and part in the city limits? Does that matter? Does it all have to be the same?
I think there's a state-dependent answer there that I'm not going to be able to address.
Find a lawyer that knows about municipal real estate law and knows it well, and get one quick. That's
Okay.
the best thing you can do.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, my name is Carla Gasso. I want to say thank you again to all of you guys. Prescott, I'm very impressed with all of your knowledge on that. I was in the IT industry. I started as a COBOL programmer, writing JCL, moved on to be an Oracle store procedure. I know you get what I'm writing.
Exactly what you're saying.
Yes.
It's awesome.
Yes. So I moved on from being a programmer to in management. I spent the last 10 years at AT&T downtown in fixed assets. We calculated depreciation on data centers. What started off with mainframes, got smaller and smaller and smaller. The building downtown, 10 I sold for about $130 million in 2007. In 2017, it sold and bankruptcy for $4 million. Chris Slusser came to our Troy meeting, and he's trying to present that we're going to get all this tax revenue, right? He presented houses that are worth $300,000 and $500,000 and how much tax revenue. You made a presentation also about he's only presenting one data point, guys. I've talked to him and he's like, oh, it's going to be fine, it's going to be fine. This is not true, guys. We need to call Chris Slusser and tell him, come present your information about the tax revenue for 10 to 15 years. It's not going to be there. I know from working with AT&T in IT and in fixed assets. Do you have any, you kind of agree?
100% agree. It's potentially volatile.
It is.
There's some maybe mild chance that they build it and it stays valuable for 40 years. There's a mild chance of that. I'll give you that. But if it's 75% of your village's revenue, are you going to take that risk? That's irresponsible. The technology changes too much. You don't bet all of it on one big giant high risk bet. That's just irresponsible management.
I agree. So I just want to ask everybody in the audience, if they can, try to call, contact, email Chris Slusser and ask him for more proof that our property, that taxes are going to go down. Ask him to forecast 10 years of data. Thank you.
I guess I'll be the next one. I don't agree to any of this here, that data centers, a lot of people don't realize the contamination of water. There's not gonna be no set limit on, I thought my mouth was big enough, usually it is at city council meetings. But there's not gonna be no set limit on enough money to use this closed loop system to be able to get rid of all the contamination that it's gonna put in the groundwater and our electric grid. There just ain't no simple answer to none of it. And we got a bunch of politicians that always want to claim that they know and they want, they know and they want. It's all they want is money. There's no real answer to it because nobody's that smart, except for the ones that putting in the tech AI buildings, you know. I do have to congratulate, we did have 3 councilmen from Grant City that attended the meeting tonight to bring the information back to the city council of Grant. The only problem of it is there's 11 people on that board. And I think with being a political advocate of politics all my life, I think coming from secondhand mouth, our mayor should have been here. The mayor in every town should have been here at this meeting because this has been the best. And I believe, in my own point of view, that if they didn't give a shit enough about to come to this meeting, they don't care about their town, they don't care about the people in it, and they don't even care about their self or their kids, or their wife, their grandma, their grandpa, the grandkids. Where are we gonna keep selling ourselves out for money? There's gotta be an answer to it. Just stop it. Get more knowledge. If you ain't got the knowledge, go back to school. I mean, if you can't read and comprehend, go to school. I mean, you can even play them headphones at night when you're sleeping. You know, keeps on, keeping the brain alive, They play it on the baby, when the mother's pregnant to make the kid more intelligent. My sister done it with her 3 youngest boys, and believe me, they all got real good jobs. I just wish the technology would have been there when I was growing up. I had to listen to all these old folks give me information, the reason why I got the knowledge that I got. I've been in construction, I've done everything there is, even computer work, and there's no good answer to none of this technology that they're bringing to you. And they said, well, you need AI, you need AI. Since when? AI is already on my phone. I'm playing it right now. How many more do you need? There's a time to stop. Yeah.
Hi, I'm back. I just wanted to make a comment. I have worked for corporate America for 30 plus years. And I would like, you can't hear me? Okay. I have worked for corporate America for 30 years. I'm a capitalist. I don't want these data centers anywhere near me. And I can tell you that it's cheaper for corporations to pay fines, settle lawsuits, than to do the right thing and to do it right.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for showing up tonight. It was great to see you guys, especially when there's not one breathing down our neck, but still waiting on the full proposal. But thank you, everybody, for showing up tonight. Any words of wisdom?
Everybody keep her moving and watch for deer on your way home.